876 words, within the 900 plus or minus 5% target. Here's the script. For 60 years, the official record said Danny Gardella simply walked away from baseball in 1946. Quit, faded out, nothing more to see here. That's the story they tell, it isn't what happened. The commissioner's office made sure you'd never learn he was banned, blacklisted for getting paid what he was actually worth. Someone made sure this stayed buried for 6 decades. Here's what the records were rewritten to hide. 1946. Danny Gardella is a New York Giants outfielder. Ballplayers earn almost nothing. The reserve clause chains every man to one team forever for as long as ownership wants him. No leverage, no negotiating. Say no and you don't play anywhere in America. Then Mexico calls. A rival league bankrolled by a millionaire named Jorge Pascual offers real money, sometimes triple a major league salary. Gardella jumps. So do 17 other players. To fans, it looks like a footnote. A handful of guys chasing a paycheck south of the border. That's the surface story. The men running baseball don't see a footnote. They see a threat to the whole system. Commissioner Happy Chandler doesn't wait to find out. He bans every jumper for 5 years. 5 years for signing a contract with a legal operating league. No hearing, no appeal at first, just an announcement. Gardella is done, he's told, not suspended, erased. His name drops out of box scores. Writers stop mentioning him like he was never on a roster in his life. That's the first crack in the official story, because the footnote gets a lawyer. In 1949, Gardella sues organized baseball. He argues the reserve clause is an illegal monopoly, restraint of trade, the same argument that will eventually blow free agency wide open, 25 years early. A federal appeals court agrees there's a real case here. Baseball's lawyers panic. They understand something the fans never will. If this reaches a full trial, the entire economic foundation of the sport gets read into open court. But that's not the part they buried. The obvious version says baseball settles because Gardella deserves it. That's not why. Baseball settles in 1949 for a payment and a quiet reinstatement, but only after making sure the case never reaches a jury. A jury verdict becomes public record forever. A private settlement becomes nothing. No transcript. No admission. No precedent anyone can ever point to. Gardella gets a check. Organized baseball gets silence. On paper, it looks like a win for the player. It isn't. Look closer. The settlement includes no ruling that the reserve clause is even legal because they already suspect it might not survive one. Here's what actually got covered up. The commissioner's office didn't just ban 18 ball players. It made sure sports writers and league men remembered the Mexican League jumpers. If they were remembered at all, as ungrateful, as disloyal, as men who abandoned the game for money. That framing wasn't an accident. It was strategy. Because if fans ever understood these players had a legitimate legal claim against the reserve clause, other players would start asking the same question. And baseball could not survive that conversation in 1946. Not with attendance still recovering from the war. Not with labor regulators already circling professional sports contracts. So the league buried the legal substance of Gardella's claim inside a private settlement, and buried the man himself inside a false story about a player who simply chose to leave. For 60 years, that framing held. Historians barely mention Gardella versus Chandler. Law schools that teach labor history skip it entirely. But that 1949 appellate ruling, the one that said his antitrust claim could proceed, becomes the exact precedent Kurt Flood's lawyers dust off in 1969. It's the exact reasoning arbitrator Peter Sates leans on in 1975, the day free agency finally, actually arrives. That's the cost. Every player from 1949 to 1975 plays his entire career inside a system a federal court had already cracked open, and never knows it. Whole contracts get signed, whole careers get spent, under a clause that may have already been unenforceable in the eyes of the law. Gardella himself gets no credit. He drifts through the minors, disappears from the game, and dies in 2005, remembered, if remembered at all, as a guy who quit over money. Not as the man whose lawsuit is the real reason free agency exists a quarter century before Kurt Flood becomes the name every fan learns. The official record still reads clean. Reserve clause challenged, reserve clause survives, case closed. It leaves out the part where baseball's own lawyers believed they might lose and paid quietly to make sure nobody ever found out for certain. That's not a settlement. That's a cover-up with a signature on it. So ask yourself why a sport that worships its own history barely teaches this case. Ask why the man who nearly broke the reserve clause in 1949 is a footnote, while the man who finally broke it gets the documentary. The settlement was sealed. The full terms have never been published. 60 years later, you still don't know exactly what baseball paid to keep this quiet, or what else in that same file still hasn't surfaced. The story is built on a real case, Gardella v. Chandler 1949, and the Mexican League blacklist, dramatized in the channel's investigative voice. Saved, too. Home/JarvisAdmin/Hidden Game Baseball Script, TXT.